Okay, let's dive right into this explainer by asking a question that honestly has probably crossed your mind at some point while boarding a flight. What really happens behind the scenes when an aircraft actually goes down? Today we are setting the stage for a seriously fascinating look at international aviation law. We're going to strip away all that sensationalism you usually see in the news and instead look at the actual, highly structured global framework that governs these massive, incredibly complex investigations.
So let's kick things off with a hypothetical mystery. Imagine a massive commercial airliner. It's carrying passengers from 20 different nations. It was designed in one country, manufactured in another, and operated by an airline from a completely different third country. Now imagine it suddenly disappears over international waters. Just think about the immediate aftermath for a second. When a plane crashes in international waters, who is exactly in charge? Without some sort of pre-agreed system, you can pretty easily picture the chaotic, absolute jurisdictional nightmare that would follow. I mean, who secures the wreckage? Who gets to analyze the black boxes? Who is responsible for talking to the families?
Well, the solution to that nightmare is a document known as ICAO's Annex 13. The International Civil Aviation Organization created this internationally agreed-upon treaty, and it basically acts as the ultimate global rulebook for aviation investigations. It steps right in to resolve all of those jurisdictional disputes before they even have a chance to happen. The protocols in this very document are literally the exact reason why commercial flying has evolved into the safest mode of transport in human history.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 6 key areas: the Prime Directive, defining the parameters, first steps and notification, who investigates, inside the investigation, and finally, the final report.
Section 1. The Prime Directive. Prevention, not blame.
We're going to break down this highly bureaucratic framework into a neat, chronological procedural so you can see exactly how an investigation unfolds step by step. Now, what's really interesting here is a rule that almost always surprises the general public, especially considering our highly litigious modern world. Look at this quote from Chapter 3 of Annex 13. It's basically our narrative North Star for this whole topic. It says, "The sole objective of the investigation of an accident or incident shall be the prevention of accidents and incidents. It is not the purpose of this activity to apportion blame or liability." Think about how profound that actually is. The absolute sole objective of these investigators is preventing future tragedies. Their job is not to hand out lawsuits, it's not to assign financial liability, and it's definitely not to bring criminal charges. Their mandate is purely to find out what went wrong so it never, ever happens again.
Section 2. Defining the parameters, navigating the terminology.
Before we mentally get our boots on the ground at a crash site, let's bust a little bit of jargon. Annex 13 makes a very strict, specific distinction between an accident and a serious incident. So an accident means someone was fatally or seriously injured, the aircraft sustained actual structural damage, or the plane is just completely missing. A serious incident, on the flip side, means there was a really high probability of an accident occurring, but disaster was narrowly avoided. So the crucial takeaway here is that the difference between an accident and a serious incident lies purely in the final outcome. The underlying failures that led to the event might be exactly the same.
We also really need to differentiate between causes and contributing factors. Causes are the direct actions or omissions that led straight to the event. Contributing factors, though, are the background conditions that, if they had just been absent, would have reduced the chances of the crash happening, or at least made it less severe. Annex 13 carefully distinguishes between the two. But remember our Prime Directive from earlier, identifying a cause or a contributing factor does not imply the assignment of fault or liability to any person or any company, period.
Section 3. First steps and notification. The domino effect. Okay, we're jumping into Chapter 4 of the Annex to see how a massive, complex domino effect kicks off. The literal second an aircraft encounters trouble, a rapid-fire notification sequence is triggered. First up, the country where the event happens, which is known as the state of occurrence, identifies the crash. They have to immediately alert the state of registry and the state of the operator. Then they notify the state of design and the state of manufacture. Finally, if the aircraft happens to weigh more than 2,250 kilograms, they notify ICAO itself. And this all happens by the absolute quickest means available, kicking the whole global response into high gear.
Section 4. Who investigates? Establishing jurisdiction.
Once everyone around the globe is notified, the immediate, most pressing question becomes, who actually takes charge of this thing? Well, the state of occurrence, again, the country whose soil the plane actually crashed on, usually institutes the investigation. They're the ones responsible for protecting the evidence and securing the wreckage. But they aren't forced to do it all alone. By mutual consent, they can delegate the investigation entirely, or even just in part, to the state of registry, the state of the operator, or the state of design.
Now, let's answer our hypothetical mystery from the very beginning of this explainer. What if the plane goes down in an undetermined location, or out in international waters? Annex 13 explicitly states that in this exact scenario, the state of registry is obligated to institute and conduct the investigation. So if the plane is registered in France but goes down in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, France takes the lead. Everyone else just assists.
Section 5, Inside the Investigation. Protecting the evidence. All right, so the investigators are finally on the ground and the wreckage is totally secured. A massive foundational rule governs their forensic work here. The Accident Investigation Authority must have complete independence in how they conduct the investigation. To find the real truth without any interference, these authorities have to operate completely separately from local police, from the courts, and even from the state aviation regulators. If investigators are worried about the police swooping in and using their findings to throw a pilot in jail, the whole investigation is compromised right from the start. And this brings us to what's often called the sacred trust of the investigation. Highly sensitive materials, things like cockpit voice recordings, witness statements, and private medical info, are strictly, entirely shielded from the public and the judicial systems. And why is that? Because if a pilot or an air traffic controller knows their honest testimony or their private cockpit chatter is going to be broadcast on the evening news or used in a massive lawsuit against them, they just won't talk. Shielding this data ensures witnesses are fully honest, which is absolutely vital for making things safer.
Of course, we have to talk about the famous black boxes, which are officially known as flight recorders. Annex 13 mandates that these recorders must be read out without any delay. Now, what's really fascinating here is that if the investigating state lacks the super high-tech facilities required to extract data from a heavily damaged recorder, they are actually required by the treaty to use capable facilities from other states. Global teamwork is literally baked right into the rules.
But you know, it's not all just about the machinery and the flight data. Investigators also rely heavily on crucial medical examinations. Annex 13 requires a complete autopsy for any fatally injured flight crew. And for surviving crew and passengers, it mandates expeditious medical examinations. This is all done to rule in or rule out physical and psychological human factors. Was there a hidden medical emergency no one knew about? Was there toxic smoke in the cabin? The medical data is truly just as critical as the flight data.
Section 6, the final report. Sharing the findings.
So we reach the culmination of the process, compiling what is usually months or even years of data. But you don't just publish a report overnight. Before anything goes public, there is a very rigorous peer review process. The investigating state has to send a draft report to all the participating states, like the state of design and the state of manufacture. Those nations then have exactly 60 days to review the draft, double-check all the technical details, and submit substantiated comments. It turns into this intense technical debate to ensure the final document is flawlessly accurate.
It's honestly an incredible race against the clock. By day 30, a preliminary report must be dispatched. The ultimate goal is to publicly release the final report within 12 months of the crash. However, aviation investigations are notoriously complex, right? If that 12-month deadline just can't be met, the investigating state is strictly required to release a mandatory interim statement on the exact anniversary of the crash, detailing all the progress made so far.
The absolute ultimate deliverable of the final report. The whole reason this entire mechanism even exists is the safety recommendation. This brings us full circle, right back to our prime directive. A safety recommendation is a formal proposal based on the investigation findings made solely to prevent future accidents and never ever to presume blame.
And let me tell you, these recommendations have some real teeth to them. When a state receives a safety recommendation, say an instruction to redesign a specific engine valve, they can't just toss it in a drawer and ignore it. Under Annex 13, receiving states have 90 days to respond directly to the proposing state with their concrete action plan to enhance aviation safety, or they must explicitly state why no action will be taken. It forces accountability entirely without forcing liability.
So, I want to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought to consider. Would total transparency, like releasing all that raw cockpit audio straight to the media and immediately assigning legal blame, would that actually hinder safety by making crews completely afraid to report their mistakes? Really think about it. The prevention, not blame philosophy can definitely be frustrating to a public that is demanding immediate justice, but it is the exact reason global aviation remains so incredibly, remarkably safe today. By protecting the people involved, we protect the truth. And by finding the truth, we save lives on every single flight taken tomorrow. Thanks so much for exploring this with me.